All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. We want to respect everyone's time. Thank you to the early birds for being here. And thank you for joining the webinar. My name is Laurel Rodriguez, and I am the Director of Marketing at SureImpact. Our topic today is Smarter, Not Harder, Tech Tools to Do More with Less and Improve Impact. Our speaker today is Sherry Cheney Jones, founder and president of SureImpact. Sherry is a social change entrepreneur, an expert in social impact measurement, and a thought leader in applied organizational research. She believes in data, metrics, and accountability. For more than 25 years, she has worked alongside foundation, nonprofit, and government leaders to help them use data to solve complex social problems. Sherry is passionate about women's equity and the advancement of girls. She is a past Columbus chapter president of the National Association of Women Business Owners and a commissioner for the Columbus Women's Commission for the Mayor's Office. Just a quick note, you will be muted throughout the presentation, but feel free to submit as many questions as you would like in the chat. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn the time over to Sherry.
Thank you so much, Laurel, and good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are calling from in the world. I'm so excited and grateful that you have spent a little bit of your day and your time with us. Please feel free to introduce yourself. I think the chat is open. In the chat today, I'd love to know where people are calling from because it can help me tailor my presentations to maybe your work and your mission. So please feel free to do that. And I'm really excited to hopefully help you think about your work in a new and different way. Or maybe the webinar today is to help you bring back some key questions to your team and really consider, how are you doing your work? Can you be doing your work smarter, not harder? And first, I think it's really important that we start with understanding that if you are working in a nonprofit organization, specifically in the US right now, we are seeing a complete paradigm shift. This is not a recession. This is not an economic downturn. It is I think historians will look back on this period of 2025, 2026 as a moment of redefinition for how our sector works and operates and is thought of. And I think the leaders who kind of grasp this and understand this now are going to be much better positioned in the future than those who are kind of just waiting for it to come back like it was in 2021 or 2022, because I don't believe that will be happening anytime soon. So here's the reality. The nonprofits and funders are facing an estimated $110 billion funding gap. So that is the amount of money that has, kind of been redistributed or gone away from nonprofits, and funders are left saying, how are we going to fill this $110 billion funding gap that used to come from government sources that are no longer there? And so you've got your philanthropists, your private donors, your funders that are being inundated with requests for funding where they might not have been asked to fund these particular services. And I have spent a lot of time interviewing these philanthropic leaders, these individual donors who can write the big six-figure checks that we all want, that helps us fuel our operations. And what we're learning is that they're making decisions differently. Yes, there are pledges of our billionaires in our country to give away the majority of their wealth in their lifetime, but they're not just, writing checks. I was talking to a nonprofit leader just yesterday, and the quote that he said was, if any nonprofit leader is thinking that they're going to get funding on thoughts and feelings, they need to think again. Right? They're making decisions from a much different place. I've heard legislatures say things to me like, you know what, we just want to burn it down and build it back up. And so, that we can look at history, we can look at nature, for example, and sometimes that's what is required of ecosystems for rebirth and renewal, and that's great. But it's representing a structural shift in how social impact work is funded, and it means we need to respond differently as well to meet the needs. So the number one thing that we are seeing change, it's not that the needs in our community have changed. It's not that your work isn't is extremely as important as it was before. It's that philanthropists are starting to ask questions, donors, policymakers are starting to ask questions and say, we have invested billions upon billions of dollars into solving for food insecurity, solving for homelessness, solving for early childhood education, early childhood outcomes. Right? They're looking at the budgets and the amount of resources that have been poured into these causes with very little change. And if anything, we're seeing needs rise, more people in demand of services. So they're starting to ask the question, the hard question, what is that social return on investment of these dollars that I am giving? Are they making a difference? And they want to be giving their dollars to the organizations that can demonstrate and answer these questions. So these are the questions that your nonprofits are going to need to be able to not only communicate in a theoretical level, like if you fund us, we will generate these outcomes. No, we are creating these outcomes. And if you fund us, we can scale it, we can grow it, we can improve it. You will start to see real systematic change in our communities through your investments. So think about your own work and can you ask, what outcomes are you creating? Can you ask, who are you helping? In a sense of, are they the target population? Are they the people who really need your services? Can you point to where they're coming from in terms of what neighborhoods or zip codes are they living in? Are there different needs for different populations or different members of your community? What is changing because of our work? Are we starting to see people thriving and flourishing? That's ultimately what funders want to fund. I was on a panel, watching a panel a couple weeks ago, and one of the larger development funders from the city said something about, I would rather fund a program that gets 10 people to stability than 100 people just a band-aid. And so this is the strategic work. This is the shift that funders are looking for. And they're recognizing that it might cost more to help those 10 families move from instability to stability. And they're willing to pay for it if you can demonstrate how your intervention is changing those chronic needs of individuals. And how do you know? Is it just a great story or can you prove it? Do you have the data to show us or show the funder your impact? So these are the questions that nonprofits are going to need to ask or need to answer in order to attract the resources that are available to them. So I am curious, let's take a poll. So if you were asked right now, what outcomes did you create in quarter two of 2026? So we're right now in July 14th. This is end of fiscal year reporting for a lot of people, end of quarter for a lot of people. So someone says, hey, in quarter two, tell me the outcomes that you produced. What best describes you? I'd love to know. Can you just talk about stories? Do you have to go back to someone in your organization and maybe they take you a few weeks to crunch those data? Do you have to go to a static report that someone else prepared? And so if someone had follow-up questions, you wouldn't know the answers. Or could you log in into a secure platform and have real-time answers? I would love to know kind of where the state of things are with those of you on the webinar today. All right, great. Okay, well, I'm happy to see that we've got 33% say, yeah, I could log in and have real-time answers. I hope you are all Sure Impact customers, those 9 of you who have access to real-time data. But it looks like most of you are somewhere in the gotta go chase down somebody to get me those answers or reference some static report that's been prepared. And therefore, if you had to follow up or you wanted to dig in, you would not have those answers. So we're going to talk about why we want to really think about real-time data. How do we leverage technology to help us meet this new structural shift? And the good news story today is that working harder is not the answer. We can no longer effort our way into a new reality. We have to just stop and pause and say, okay, this is what's being required of us now. This is what's going to be required of us going forward. How can I actually leverage technology so that it's easier, not harder, to answer these questions? And we're moving into a different world. We're moving into a different era where technology is helping us navigate this world of constant change. And so the high performing leaders, the leaders who are getting ahead in this current environment, and not only in this current environment, but the environment that we will be living in over the next, several decades, is that we have to adapt quickly. Because of the technology, because of where the world is today, things are rapidly changing at a pace that, it changes the way we lead. It changes our leadership. We are not able to just kind of, have death by committees or death by board meetings anymore. We have to have systems and processes in place that allow us to use the information quickly and adapt as we start to see trends and find those trends and pivot and change so we can meet the needs in our community and have those real those hard conversations. And so we have limited resources, just like the funders, the donors have limited resources. Your nonprofits have limited resources, and you need to make informed decisions. You need to figure out what is going to be the most effective intervention, the most effective way to deliver our services to meet the needs of our community. And we need to be able to respond with what our funders are asking for and be able to give them the data they need so that we can continue to do our great work. And then another thing we're seeing a lot is that funders are looking for collaboration. They much rather work with a group of nonprofits who come together and say, hey, we are all working together to address early childhood learning, or we're all working together. I'm going to tell some collaborative stories later today where we're all working together on middle school, after school, social emotional learning and education. So when nonprofits join forces, whether they're all in on solving one problem together or they're looking at a holistic wraparound of a family or a community or support, funders rally behind that because they know that this social change cannot happen by one individual organization, but we definitely could start to see it if we have us all working together, focused on the same outcomes. So why we think it's so hard today is because this is what the current state looks like. If you're looking at my screen, is the current reality is not set up for you to work smarter. It's set up to make it feel impossible. You've got, we talk to nonprofit leaders 10 times a day. Like that's all I do all day, every day is talk to a variety of nonprofit leaders learning about their current realities. And so you're living with data in multiple spreadsheets. Maybe you've got things on forms where people are signing in or they're, filling out a paper survey. So you've got all this data living in a variety of places, but it's not connected. It's not put together. Therefore, it either feels impossible or it takes way too much working harder, way too much time to get to those core questions that we asked earlier. So what we want to do here at Sure Impact is we want you to reframe when you think about technology, when you think about, receiving what is available in our world is a gift of time. It's thinking about you have, again, talk about a limited resource. Time is the only resource that we all have equally. We are all given 24 hours every single day, and we have so many competing priorities. If budgets are shrinking, you probably have less staff to do the work, but the needs are growing. So can we reframe technology and say, how can we leverage technology to actually do more than we've done in the past and be more effective and efficient than we've done in the past while still getting time back. So it is totally possible, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And that is exactly why Sure Impact was created. So many of you may know that I was a program evaluator for over 2 decades. I started out as a government funder for about 10 years, and my job was to evaluate the impact of the grants that we gave out, as well as then evaluate the impact of our own work. Then I left that job and ran a program evaluation company where we were working with hundreds and thousands of nonprofits, helping them identify what should they measure and how should they measure it. And I realized that current state with all those spreadsheets and all those papers, that was preventing people from success because the technology and the systems were not designed to give you those answers to those key questions that we began this webinar with. So you have it at your fingertips. You have it when you need it. And so we set out to create that platform that gives you the answers in real time to what funders are asking for so that you can it is easier. You can make decisions when you need to make decisions more quickly. You've got the data where you need it. You don't have to chase anybody. You don't have to crunch any numbers. It's just there for you when you need it. It'll help you spot problems faster. There is nothing more devastating that when an organization waits to the after 12 months of doing programming to realize that their engagement was low. Because if your engagement is low, guess what? Your outcomes are going to be low. So we've got to have real-time insights into how are people engaging in our programs? What services are we providing to them? And are we hitting those milestones that are going to predict that at the end of the day, we are going to see changes in our community? And we also want to be able to spot those so we can pivot. You know, I think about the for-profit, our for-profit friends all the time, and their boards of directors expect that leadership and the CEO to achieve success. So they are expecting to show up at the board meetings and having outcomes data that are aligned with the strategy and the purposes of that organization. And they expect that CEO or that leadership to be monitoring those key performance indicators, to be monitoring those outcomes and making adjustments with the team along the way so that at every board meeting, there's, hey, success, there's progress, there's learning, there's growth. And that is what funders are asking nonprofits to do, is not to measure the same outcomes as the for-profit, but to adopt more of this strategic data-driven thinking. And also where we've got a lot of things going. One, our budgets might be tighter than before. Two, there's just less people in the workforce than there used to be. And so it's not about cutting staff or not using staff. We still need people to do what people does best, but it's more about where can you leverage technology so you can scale and be more effective and efficient without adding more staff. And you can understand what's going on to your community and respond to changing needs. And so when we were, envisioning what this reality could be, which is now Sure Impact, these were the outcomes. These were the tangible things that we wanted to make sure that we were empowering nonprofits to have, and not just thinking about, reports or spreadsheets. We really were wanting to be intentional about how do we help nonprofits do things better. And a lot of what drove the design and implementation and the way Sure Impact thinks and how it helps nonprofits do work smarter and not harder was the research that I did in my book, Impact and Excellence. So I mentioned I worked for government. When I was leaving government, I did an extensive research study of nonprofits across the US, really looking at data, how they were using data, what data did they have, and how are they creating these what we called in the book, high-performing measurement cultures. And what a high-performing measurement culture is, it's really this attitude, this mindset, this process where organizational leaders set a outcomes-based, impact-based strategy where they're managing to those outcomes. We've since kind of evolved our language. Instead of strategic plans, we call it impact roadmaps, where it's like, hey, we're in the business of social change. We're in the business of reducing food insecurity, or we're in the business of getting people jobs, or we're in the business of human flourishing or stability or, education, whatever you're in the business of. And this is how we will define success. And we are going to manage to that success. So that's pretty much what a high performing measurement culture is where you have data aligned with your mission and you're strategically using that data to make decisions. And that is at the core of the work that we're doing with Sure Impact. And why Sure Impact works the way it works is to help facilitate these measurement cultures. And why are we so passionate about creating these measurement cultures? It's this research. Look at this slide. Take a screenshot of this slide. Go text it to all your friends. Put it on social media. Because what this is showing you is that the organizations who are these are our purple ones, who have data aligned with their mission and they're strategically using it to make decisions, are significantly more successful than those who just have data and lives in a spreadsheet somewhere or lives in a report, or those who are just building relationships and anecdotal stories. So how you will interpret this graph is those with the high culture. Those are the ones that have Sure Impact and are putting outcomes in it, and they have real-time insights and are using it in their everyday meetings. Those organizations have greater efficiencies. They have greater external relationships. So relationships with the media, the funders, partner agencies, government funders, right? They're 81% of high culture organizations have strong external relationships versus 42% and 50% of our moderate to low culture organizations. 81% have better internal relationships, better communication, cooperation, collaboration, versus 30% of just the way, the kind of the current state, the way most nonprofits operate. And when we look at increased revenues in the middle of a recession, which we can it's for different reasons, but we can feel that right now, 62% of our high culture organizations had increased revenues in the past 2 years versus only 18% of our moderate and 12% of our low. So if I don't do anything today except convince you that this matters, that getting yourself to be smarter and leverage technology and have this data at your fingertips really matters to the bottom line of your organization. And frankly, most boards are missing it. Most boards are missing it. And I do have a question, so I'm going to answer that question, Howard. What does high culture mean, and how does that relate to having impact data? So high culture means, as defined in this research, is that it's a shortened phrase for high measurement culture. It is that they have impact measurement data, so data related to their organization's outcomes, and strategically using it to make decisions. So we created a measurement culture survey that looked at what data does an organization have, how are they using that data strategically to make decisions. And if they scored a particular score, they got put in that high culture category. And so I'd love to know, pull up those chats. Let's be a little bit interactive right now. Some of you might have been on this webinar before or seen me present. You can still guess, but I would love to know, what percentage of nonprofit organizations do you believe fell into that high culture category? So again, they had outcome measurement data and they were using it strategically to make decisions. What percentage would you say? Okay, Chris, 15% or less. Thanks for participating. Less than 20. All right, we've got some pessimists in the room here. Any other guesses? Got one for 15, one for 20. 7. Okay, 30. All right, Arnold. It's a little more optimistic. Ooh, Ruby, she's 50. Okay, good. Well, according to our study, we had 25% of the sector fell in that culture where they had data related to their mission and were strategically using it to make decisions. What I love is that in this preliminary, again, I would not call my little poll earlier today an official study by any means, But the fact that we had 30 say that, yeah, they could log into some system and see real time what their outcomes were in Q2, just 14 days after the end of the quarter, looks like maybe we're moving that needle a little bit, or at least those who follow us, because they could be Sure Impact customers, have those insights. That makes me really happy. But the reality is 75% of the nonprofits fell into that low to moderate culture, either meaning they had no data at all, or just outputs data, or they may have had some mechanism to collect data, whether it was surveys or tracking outcomes, but it was living in someone's office somewhere, and it wasn't being surfaced strategically to improve operations and make decisions. It was really more of a compliance function. So that 25%, so that's what Sure Impact's doing. That's what we're here to do, is to help you leverage technology to move from that moderate to low culture to that high culture. Yes, I agree, Howard, that the orgs may have the data, but whether the appropriate staff have access to it is another matter. And we see that all the time where, well, as a former program evaluator, I would have I would know everything about the organization, but no one else knew because I was the evaluator. So yeah, we'll talk about data access and data control too, and how we make sure that that's true at Sure Impact. So some of you may be on this call because you're looking for ways to leverage your technology to meet the funding requirements, kind of be positioned as the best nonprofits in your community doing the good work that you're doing. I know some of you I've had conversations with. You may be here to figure out some ways you can bring back to your team to convince them that it's time to do things differently. It's time to take the leap and move your needle from a moderate culture organization to a high measurement culture organization. And what those moderate to low culture organizations aren't seeing with their inefficient data processes is there are so many hidden costs that maybe don't show up on a budget or don't show up in the profit and loss statement. But the hidden costs that you're experiencing because of this is, not to mention just the staff headache and time of trying to like find all these pieces of data and put them together so we can respond quickly. But it's that because if you have the lack of this visibility, you're delaying decisions. You could be missing funding opportunities because you don't have the data you need to raise more money. You also can't prove your impact. And so since now, I also think there is something that people don't understand. How many philanthropists that they want to, one philanthropist I know just told me over the weekend, she's like, it is impossible to give my money away because they really don't just want to be check writers. They want to be engines of impact. Therefore, they want to invest in the organizations who are ready for change and can demonstrate they're going to be making that change. And so there are a lot of philanthropists that rely on others to decide who is going to get the grants. Like we all know about the famous Mackenzie Scott grants. Well, there was an entity or an organization that she was partnering with that was helping her evaluate who would be like good investments, who would be good to give those grants to. And if you are, not investing in these types of practices, then you're likely not going to get that, what would feel like a miraculous grant, but it's not that miraculous. It's just someone's doing their diligence and you have visible data efforts. So we want to make sure that we are leveraging technology where we need to. I know there's so much conversation around AI these days, which we definitely should be using AI when it makes sense for our mission or where it will help us do our jobs faster. But the conversation just shouldn't always be about AI because AI might not be the right solution. Especially if you have no data, you can't leverage AI. And I could go do a whole nother webinar about when we're talking about impact data and structured data, why AI right now isn't the answer. We still need machine learning. We still need discrete coding and technology that allows it to make sense and make sure we don't have errors. So we need to use our technology to eliminate administrative burden so we can do what we do best, which is helping people, serving people, and changing lives and changing circumstances. All right, so I know I love all the questions, and we will make sure that we have plenty of time at the end to answer questions. But let me give you just some examples to help you kind of put all of this in context. So Tempe Community Action Agency, an action agency that we had worked with, before they started working with Sure Impact, they had 26 spreadsheets that they had to pull together for one report. And those types of examples of where a nonprofit went from 26 different spreadsheets to put together one report, and now they can just go one place to have insights into those programs. That's what we're doing. That's what a high culture organization has the ability to do. And so we want you to be able to empower your staff, your operations to scale without adding staff. Data scientists, for example, or people who know, I'm always amazed when nonprofits tell me they have a data person, and I'm asking like, oh, who's your data person? And it's someone who understands Excel. And there's nothing wrong with understanding Excel. Excel is a very powerful tool, but it's about it's having that ability to pull together the data, make sense of the data, do some complex analysis. That takes a lot of training. So help your data platforms be leveraged, and therefore, if you do add staff, you can add staff that are actually moving your mission forward and not the administrative burden. And what we love is when we work with collaboratives. So we work with several organizations who are a collaborative. Ames Columbus, for example, is a collection of 13 after-school, middle school providers, all funded through the city of Columbus. And they're working to address social emotional learning as well as reduce juvenile delinquency and juvenile crime by giving middle school youth productive, safe places to develop, learn, and grow. And they're able to pull together all of this data where they're looking at student engagement broken down by race, gender, ethnicity, trends over time by month, the relationship between the types of services that students are receiving, and improvements in social emotional learning and feelings of protective factors. They can do all of this with not even a full-time staff person that's managing all of the operations, managing the administration, managing kind of the use of the data analysis. You also want to simplify grant reporting. There is no reason that you should be spending hours manually pulling together reports for funders anymore. The reality should be that you have the ability to go in to your secure platform and pull that grant report and send those data off to your funder. Even better yet, Sure Impact offers a collaborative license to funders. And when our clients are using Sure Impact for funding requirements, they don't even have to report anymore. The system takes care of all the number crunching for them. So, but at the core, I talk a lot about how impact data is required to raise more money because that's what people, are always thinking about. That's what's always on their mind. But at the real core of why we should embrace this is so that you can make better programming decisions, that you stop spending your time, effort, energy on programs that aren't achieving desired goals. And I know it's hard. I mean, I've been in business. I've been an entrepreneur and been working in nonprofits for 25 years. And trust me, it is hard when a program I love or something I've worked on, and I start to see that it's not achieving the expected outcomes that we thought it would achieve. But because I've always worked for very data-driven programs, we can see that earlier. And instead of just sunsetting a program, although sometimes you will, it's important to pivot and move, make those changes you needed so you can start to see the outcomes you want. Understand, where are we making the biggest impact? Are there certain services that are more impactful from others? Are there particular demographic groups that are having greater impact from others? And sometimes that disparity is super important. I was working with a client this week where we were seeing that girls had slightly lower outcomes than boys. As someone who's a huge passionate advocate for equal outcomes for all populations, that is like, oh, what are we doing? Are we leaving the girls behind? Is there something that we need to do to make sure that all people are having equal opportunities in our programs? And so that's an example of understanding what might need to be improved. So you're not just like, throwing spaghetti at the wind. You're actually using your data for real-time improvements to increase your outcomes. And then it helps you understand, where should you put your resources. So another story or example of what is possible when you leverage technology to work smarter, not harder, is the Seamer Institute is a large national funder that supports over 200 organizations across the US. And they have, every single quarter, they understand, the funders behind this institute, they understand how their network is mobilizing and creating family stability, housing stability, income stability. And they're doing it by keeping students in their own school and not having a disruptive school move. And what they are able to do, though, when they see this data, is that they can make these data-driven decisions and say, you know what, we're doing a great job at stabilizing students and making sure that students aren't forced out of their homes and have to move into a new school, which disrupts their education. But they also know that the root cause of housing stability is income. And so if they can move the needle on income, now they can stabilize a family in their home without subsidies, which then will stabilize the children at school. And through this entire network, over 6 years of data being collected and gathered, they can start to see trends on when these policies change or the economy changes. How is it impacting their results? I would highly recommend you take a look at their case study on our website. So the most successful nonprofits, the secret isn't that they're working harder. They're just responding faster. They're seeing those grant opportunities. They've got the data right there to apply for that grant. They're meeting with a potential donor. They can pull up their dashboard, show their funders how they're making a difference, so they get the check, they get the grant. They know what's working, so they invest in the programs and the initiatives that are having the greatest impact, or they're noticing where they need to improve. And so they're making those changes. So therefore, they're increasing their outcomes and having a better year-over-year success growth than those who don't. So in conclusion, we want to work smarter, adapt faster, and we want to improve your impact. So today's challenge requires agility, not just effort. 15 years ago, when I was doing specific talks like this, I would be talking about all these manual processes we had to do just so we could have data to have data. But now we have technology, so we can make better decisions just by leveraging technology to have real-time data. And technology can reduce that administrative burden and free up your staff's time to do what they do best, to do what they love. Frankly, most nonprofit leaders did not get into this business because they love managing spreadsheets and data. They might, well, hopefully they love it because they love it for what they can do for their customers or their beneficiaries, but they want to make a difference in the world. They want to work with people and see that change. And then you'll have what you need to tell those strong impact stories for long-term success. If you are wondering, this sounds great, but how do I get started? My organization is still in, spreadsheets, or we don't know our outcomes. We're not managing to outcomes. I invite you to download our Ultimate Guide to Impact Measurement. where we will provide you kind of that step-by-step approach to leverage your impact data. And we do have some time for questions, so I'm excited to take those because I know we had some.
Yeah, thank you for that, Sherry. Our first question goes right along with the ultimate guide for impact measurement.
Mhm.
And so from Ruby, she says, when you are new, how do you show impact? My business plan and strategic plan are data driven.
Awesome. Well, that makes me happy because that you're basing yourself on the right foundation. So if you're a brand new nonprofit or a brand new program, what I would recommend that you do is make sure that your program is evidence-based. Make sure that you are using data from your community needs assessment or from research that demonstrates that the problem that you're solving is actually a problem and the extent to which it is a problem in your community. Then I would also make sure that through your program intervention, you've laid out that measurement framework. Like, how will you measure success? How will you prove that you're creating change over time? Make sure that those measures that you're using or those outcomes that you're collecting, there's research behind them, and that you've seen that other nonprofits, it's a validated way to measure that construct that you're looking to measure. And so if you can demonstrate in the early days before you've started to collect all of the data, but you're going to a funder with, okay, here's the need in my community. This is the research or why I believe that my intervention is going to solve this need. And here is how I'm going to measure success over time. You will stand out like heads above even established nonprofits, frankly. And then once you do get that funding or start to be successful, now you'll have that culture of high performance where you can prove your impact. But that is how I would recommend you get started. And we also talk a lot about that in our guide.
All right. So the next question is from Chris. He says, how do you get people to see things they can't or don't want to see? And this is when you were talking about showing
Getting
data to
us.
the boards and
Yeah. How do we get, oh, well, that's a great question. I don't know your role within the organization, but um, resistance to change, it's all about really change management is what it comes down to. And as humans, we are very resistant to change. There's nothing wrong with us. We all naturally don't like change, because we're wired to want to stay safe, and our brain can sometimes tell us that that change will make us unsafe. So there are three things that I think if we're trying to get people to see things they can't see or don't want to see, there's three things we need to consider as we're kind of pitching that new idea or getting them to kind of come around to us. And so the first is helping them see how they're dissatisfied in their current environment. And I used to work with a public health director, and I know it's attributed to someone else, but this was her phrase that she would always say, never waste a crisis. And so, of course, if you're a public health director, you do not want a chronic disease or pandemic or health outbreak occurring in your community. However, when there is a crisis or when there is even something that's mildly irritating, the more you can help, especially if you have a solution to it, the more you can help people surface their own dissatisfaction with the current state, the more open they will be to hearing what you have to say that will solve their problem. So thinking about what is that natural dissatisfaction and can you surface it as part of your change management? The second is crafting a vision of what's possible in the future. So, if you're working in a nonprofit and your job is to help people have stability or flourishing, and you're getting them jobs and placing them in working environments that will allow them to meet all their needs, your staff likely came to your organization because they were passionate about that particular problem, or at least when they applied and before they started working there for a long time, that's what they originally were inspired to do and work for your organization. So bring back that vision, and what could it mean for them if they weren't spending hours pulling together reports and they could be out in the field helping more people get jobs? Like, what does that mean? What does that mean for them? What is that future vision about how they could work smarter, not harder? How they could help more people and be more efficient and be able to go home at the end of the day and feel proud about the work that they did and have evidence of success of the work that they did, right? So you think about the vision of what's possible for addressing those dissatisfaction. And the third ingredients we need are those concrete next steps, right? So if we just sit around talking about a great future and how bad things are, that's actually going to make us feel worse. But what we then need, the third thing we need is, hey, and this is how we can make it happen. And so if we're talking about, having real-time insights into our outcomes that are going to save us tons of time in data management, data collection, it's going to help us raise more money, be more efficient, scale our impact, right? If those were the types of things you're wanting to get people to see, then we will be able to give them those concrete next steps. Like, well, hey, if we invest in this technology like Sure Impact, that by the way is less than a cost of a part-time administrator to have all of this at our fingertips, let's give it a shot. Let's try it out.
The next question we have, is what data should nonprofit leaders be tracking if they only have time to focus on a few key metrics?
Okay. So I think, and this will be outlined in our guide as well, is that we are looking, it's really important that you can answer well, we talked about the questions, but I think of three types of data. The first is, what did you do? How well did you do it? And how people and communities are better off. So we want to know a little bit about who we're serving in terms of their demographics, just to make sure we're creating equal outcomes for all people. We also want to make sure that we're collecting service hours. So what did we do for them? How many hours? How many engagements? What did that look like? Because engagement, is often tied to outcomes, and we want to know at what level do we need engagement to create outcomes. And then the third is how are people better off? And the way to answer that question is a very simple, why do you do what you do? Why do your funders fund you? And why do your participants participate? And those whys are really your outcomes. They're what you should be able to measure if you're meeting those people's whys, like if you're creating that community change. And you typically only need two two of those outcomes, two of those change over time measures to show you have an effective program, but no more than five, because then you get too much data and it's a little overwhelming.
All right, thank you. So next question. So, so does this data and the current funding gap you described forecast a shakeout in the nonprofit space where low culture organizations get defunded and have to ultimately cease operations? And is that necessarily a bad thing?
Well, I don't know if it's a bad thing or not. I think it is a bad thing if the low culture organizations actually are effective at what they're doing, they just haven't been mature enough, or their leadership hasn't been brave enough to invest in the structures for measuring their success and communicating the outcome, then I do think that's a bad thing. Because what we potentially could be doing is there could be an effective organization that is going to be defunded because they cannot prove their impact. That would be a bad thing. If it's truly a shakeout in the environment, then that is a good thing. And so I really love this question, Chris, because when we think about the business models of a nonprofit versus the business models of a for-profit, the for-profit entities have a natural shaking out, as you would say. So if you're a for-profit company, your value and your metrics are directly tied. So you can use things like revenue, um, sales, right? You can use these as measures of effectiveness because if your customer base gets value from your for-profit company, they buy again, they tell their friends, they get good reviews, and therefore your sales increase. And because you're more financially healthy, you're not going to go out of business unless you wildly spend beyond your means. Whereas in the nonprofit sector, we have to remember that value is not tied to resources. And because the people receiving your services, those who are getting the value from your programs, in most cases aren't fully paying for your services, or maybe they're not paying at all. And it's the link between that value and your funder that you have to then convince the funder that you're creating that value so they will pay for the person to receive that service. And so why I bring this up is because in that sector, if we're not making the decisions really related to value, the wrong programs, and I think to be honest, it's what's been happening too long in our country, is the wrong programs may have been getting funding for the wrong reasons. And it's because they've had a great marketing campaign, or maybe have a really charismatic leader. And those things matter, but as our research showed, that without the data, it doesn't drive social change.
Thank you. Next question. Is Sure Impact currently for local domestic programming, or does it support international orgs working in many countries?
Yeah, so we primarily are working in North America. However, we do have a couple of international programs and clients. We have Project Rescue, their case studies on our website, which is an international organization addressing victims of human trafficking. So we can operate in multiple locations. We just would want to have a call to make sure we were the right fit for your organization.
All right, thank you. Next question. How does a nonprofit determine when they have a high culture?
Yes. So, not to be self-promoting even more, but in the book Impact and Excellence, I did write all about what that means. There's a assessment that you can take, but at a very basic level, I would define high culture is that you have measures related to your mission. So you have those outcome measures and you have a strategy and a purpose and a plan to use that data to make decisions. So if you're a Jim Collins fan like I am, one of the things he said is that high performing leaders they confront the brutal facts. So it's having those boards and those leadership that are collecting those metrics that matter most for their mission, and they're willing to confront them. They're willing to celebrate them when they're good, be curious when they're not so good. And at the end of the day, that's what we define as a high culture organization.
All right, thank you. So, next question. What's the best way to report outcomes when multiple partners are involved?
Well, so I think this is where creating this shared measurement framework is so important. So if you are working with multiple partners and you're looking to, and the more and more I do this, like this concept of stability and flourishing, there's the Harvard flourishing indicators, there's the Arizona self-sufficiency matrix metric measures, but there's already some frameworks out there that I think are very helpful to adopt as a collaborative in a group. And so you come together with your collaborative partners and you create this shared measurement framework where you're all kind of agreeing that, yes, we are all rowing in the same boat to achieve these outcomes. And now you may create a menu. I've done this. We do this with a lot of our collaborative partners, where if you're addressing infant vitality, you'll measure success in this way. If you're addressing homelessness, you would measure success in this way. If you're addressing workforce, you're measuring success in this way. So it's really tied to your mission. But it's if you have 5 infant vitality organizations, you're not going to measure your success 5 different ways. You're going to come together and say, we have shared interests, shared goals. Therefore, we're gonna agree to have shared measurement, and we're gonna align our activities to move those measures forward.
All right, thank you so much, Sherry. And we are going to go ahead and wrap up now. We appreciate everyone's participation and your great questions. I will be sending out the recording and the slides in the next day or two. Also, I will include Sherry's email address in case you have questions, you want to reach out with any additional questions.
Thank you
We
both. You guys have been an amazing, engaged audience. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.